Welcome back to the Nexus Podcast. Megan Stifel is my guest. Megan is the Chief Strategy Officer for the Institute for Security and Technology, and we're going to talk about the Ransomware Task Force. The task force is 4 years in, and we're going to cover some of the progress that's been made, some of the challenges that everyone's run into along the way. So nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm well.
Of course. How's the show going for you? I know it's a little chaotic always.
It is. It's. I think it's like multiple marathons with sprints in between. So you just keep.
Sounds about right.
You hit the ground running and you keep
right.
running.
So let's just jump right into the task force. I mean, like the timing of this thing at the time was a little weird because like Colonial Pipeline was a few days right after it was announced. Is that right?
Yes.
What were your kind of initial impressions, opinions of the effort, and just kind of, big picture thoughts on it?
Sure. So the task force, the idea for the task force really began in 2020 as we continued to see the escalation of threat actors leveraging ransomware to extort businesses. Of course, ransomware didn't start in 2020, right? It's been around for a long time. But over 2020 and kind of talking with people in the executive branch at that time and not seeing significant action by the U.S. government, we thought, well, let's gather some stakeholders together and see if we can make some recommendations. Of course, there was a change in administration, and so while that wasn't our kind of primary audience, it was a big stakeholder that we were trying to reach. And the idea was really to say, look, this will take collective action to reduce, as with all things in cybersecurity, but we convened the group and worked over 4 months, so really kind of got going in January of 2021. Of course, then COVID, was already a problem, and that was also a big motivator for us was as the work from home work picked up. Of course, the threat actors found that to be useful, and so we made the recommendations after a series of consultations and working groups, and it was Michael Daniel who was one of our co-chairs. Yeah, I think he said something like, "We sprinted a marathon."
And so I guess I should back up a second and just kind of maybe explain your role in the task force and kind of how that got started for you.
Sure. So the task force itself, I mentioned there were 60 plus organizations involved, and we structured it in 4 key areas. How to help organizations better prepare for and respond to ransomware. So we had 2 work streams, one on prepare, one on respond. And then how can governments and others better deter ransomware actors as well as disrupt them? So those were the other 2 work streams. And we had 2 co-chairs for each work stream. So I had the pleasure and privilege of working again with Michael Daniel. He was my boss at the White House a long time ago. Yeah. We led the respond working group. And then we had on the prepare side, Jen Ellis and John Davis. Jen at the time was at Rapid7, so a corporate. Palo Alto Networks, John Davis. We also had co-chairs from Microsoft, Resilience, the insurer. Michael Phillips is one of our panelists tomorrow. Chris Painter, I can't forget Chris, and Phil Reiner. So really looking at trying to, again, build a coalition of vantage points through which we could address the ransomware risk through these 4 kind of key areas. And then there was not an even number of recommendations. There were 48 in total, but there were not 12 in each. We were front-loaded in some areas and not enough in others.
Right. Some heavyweights there. I mean, I know Jen pretty well. She's great, and Chris Painter's very smart. I mean, a lot of good people.
Yes, it was really great to. I think one of the reasons that I would say that we were so effective or the recommendations that we made have been effective is because we had people who knew how the government would respond to this and how to leverage our collective prior insight of, I don't think I want to say how many decades of government experience we had as co-chairs, but I think that really made for the lasting impact that it's had.
So of the 2 work streams that you mentioned, I would imagine kind of the deter, disrupt these groups is the more challenging one given, I mean, everybody knows these guys are not here sitting in the United States for the most part. Extradition's a tough thing. Getting any kind of coalition with international law enforcement takes time. Just what was your experience in that respect?
I think in some ways we saw the most action in deter and disrupt in the early days. Right after Colonial, then President Biden had a meeting in the Rose Garden, and there was a big public push against
Sure.
Against the threat actors. And shortly thereafter, right in the fall of 2021, is when the first counter-ransomware initiative meeting happened. So again, these deterrence signals that we're getting from government, the G7 had a statement over this summer of 2021 and identified ransomware. I think disruption, similarly, over the years has gained momentum. We still think, though, that there is tremendous room for opportunity to better disrupt these threat actors, and that will happen with government and industry obviously working more closely together. We all talk about that. But I think for us, we see one of the big sticking points as the government being able to say, this is what's of highest importance to us, or, hey, that piece of information you just shared, that was really useful.
Yeah.
And so that continues to be one of my passion projects, if you will, of this effort. I think, but the takeaway, I think, has been there has been tremendous willingness on the deterrence side by governments to come to the table and talk about this.
Yeah.
The CRI now is 4 years running and 70 plus countries and organizations.
How do you characterize ransomware as, or rank it, among the threats that are out there? I mean, it can be so devastating, so disruptive, and it's still a thing 10 years as a profit model for attackers.
Yeah. I think it's report season, right? So the Verizon DBIR is out, and IC3's report came out last week. It's still up there at the top,
right,
or near the top, and unfortunately, that's where I think it belongs. What we would like to see, though, is the task force. Yes, it was the Ransomware Task Force, but it was never really about ransomware. That was the pebble in the ocean that we could get people to try and galvanize around. But we thought, and we do continue to think, that working through some of the measures that will combat ransomware will also have knock-on effects to reduce risks from other threats, including other nation-state actors.
Sure.
So it's at the top, but it's not, things that can be effective and impactful in reducing the ransomware risk will also buy down risk from other threat models.
Right. All right, so let's talk about kind of the original report and the original recommendations. I think I saw an updated report that you guys have made progress on half of the recommendations. Let's start with the good news. Where do you think the best work has been done, the most progress, et cetera?
So definitely, I would say on the deterrence and disruption side, we've seen pretty solid progress. I already kind of mentioned the counter ransomware initiative and some of the public statements from government leaders. We think one of the big pushes that we had was for incident reporting, and while that's not every person's favorite topic of we do call for regulatory harmonization, but the idea of there is a tremendous information gap. The quality and quantity of information that's being shared and identified about ransomware, as with many other cyber threats, is not great.
Yeah.
So we called for incident reporting in our report, and obviously CIRCIA has passed. Similarly, things like the state and local, tribal and territorial grant program that CISA has been running, DHS has been running, was also a recommendation that we called for, and that's a program that's been, we hope to be, will be renewed in this budget season. It's critically important, especially as the administration is signaling that they want to drive the action back to the states. That program would be tremendously impactful in seeing that through. The disruption side, we called for something called the Joint Ransomware Task Force. That also became law.
Right.
So some people, particularly as a civil society organization, how do you judge impact? And for us, seeing significant progress on 24 of 48 recommendations, including through public statements as well as legislation, is one of the ways that we judge impact. So the success, I think, is also in having industry come together through the work of the task force, and so we had competitors, frankly, sitting at the same table and putting their kind of bottom line aside to really drive and think carefully about what could make a difference.
That's a huge hurdle, though. I mean, nobody wants to tell the other guy that we've been hit or that we're vulnerable, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yes.
And there have been a lot of calls from the government and around reporting, in certain time frames, et cetera. how well do they understand the problem set? Because sometimes some of these reporting mandates weren't super realistic, reporting within 48 hours of a breach or whatever it was. You don't understand the full scope of something at that point. So,
yes. One of the things that we called for, we had the Cyber Incident Reporting Framework was the project that we published in 2022. And one of the points that we made there, and we actually then submitted comments to the request for information that is informing the CERCIA implementation, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act. I got it all out there in one fell swoop. Is that there needs to be an ability to update the information that's been disclosed.
Yeah.
I tend to think, but it doesn't make me very popular with my industry peers, that there is a need to get to inform the one's competitors, peers, et cetera, that there has been a breach because it's likely going to impact them as well.
Gotcha.
And so the quicker we can get the information to a central place that can then be shared, whether it's through the ISACs or through JCDC or other places, the better prepared we will be as a society. And that's where we know we need to move.
And what kind of information are you hoping that gets disclosed? Is it just indicators of compromise or something beyond that?
I think IOC is great, but context is always king. One of the things that shocked me a bit when Michael and I were working through the Respond group was that in the Styx taxi model of indicator sharing, there isn't like a click the box for ransomware. And so thinking about where are you seeing this IOC, in what type of an attack has it been leveraged? And that I think was another piece that we thought one of our other key I was disappointed to see was that the format for reporting, including to the government, our government, the United States government, is not consistent. It's not common. So CISA, the folks at DHS ask for one set of information. FBI AC3 has a different set of information. So we thought also that there needed to be a commonality.
Yeah.
Because to try and get me in a better position with my industry peers, make it easy. Don't overcomplicate it. The easier we can make it, the faster we will get it, and the better more protected we will be.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not useful.
No. Yeah.
All right. So again, just going back to the updated report, there were 24 recommendations that are still kind of being worked on, or I don't even know if lagging is the right word, but
yes.
What are some of those you'd like to see prioritized? And where would you need help, more legislative help or more from another area?
Yes. I think for me, the biggest one really is, one of the biggest ones is this idea around operational collaboration and how can industry and the government better work together to defeat these threat actors through a strategic campaign that will have knock-on effects. That, I think, as I said a couple minutes ago, there is the most room for benefit, I think, on that space. But, we need to shift left. We all need to shift left. And so at the time, there were not explicit references to secure by design, but certainly that is on our top priority list.
Sure.
While it was not one of the 48 recommendations, that's what will get us to a place where we're no longer talking about ransomware. So we need to move there. Before that, that is a market shift, so that will take time. On the prepare side of things, we still think that there's tremendous room for growth. I mentioned the state and local grant programs, which can help organizations buy, rip and replace potentially.
Yeah. A
number of other ways that those funds can be expended. But one of the things that we called for was a nationwide awareness campaign, and that hasn't happened. It's great that we have Craig Newmark has just launched, kind of brought to RSA this Pause Take 9, and we're a member of that initiative. But really getting in the minds of consumers that it takes all of us to defeat this, and one person can actually have an outsized impact, because if you don't click the phishing link, the exploit doesn't make its way. So
I think that's been a problem for a long time. We're kind of in this echo chamber. I know what it is, you know what the problem is, but telling my mom, telling my sister, it's not the same. And it's a different kind of messaging.
Yes, and we all play family CISO. I'm like, don't forward me the email, Mom. Just call me on the phone and ask me if it's real.
Right. Yeah, I've actually trained my mom a little bit, and she calls me if she gets a weird text. I'm like, don't click anything, don't touch it, leave it
delete.
Alone. And U.S. government, what kind of resources should they be allocating? What are they allocating that's helpful? What's your take there?
I had the benefit of testifying. I've testified 3 times now about ransomware before Senate and House. And last year I was testifying before a subcommittee on the House side in banking and finance. And one of the things that I said is like we need to better resource this initiative. So that means that we do continue to need to fund investigators.
Yeah.
And we need to continue to fund our responders. So the work that CISA can do voluntarily, if they're called in, can be tremendously impactful in helping an organization reduce its gaps, its vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But they are going to succeed, and so we need to have investigators at the federal and, we haven't talked about, kind of state and local investigative capacity is quite minimal when it comes to cybercrime. So those are 2 areas where I think we would hope that there would not be cuts. And at the end of the day, it impacts Main Street ransomware. All cybercrime does. It is a Main Street consumer issue, and we want to continue to see the United States to be an economic powerhouse.
Sure.
And so one of the ways that we need to do that is to protect our citizens.
That's always the big challenge too. It's like getting to legislators. I mean, the staff for the most part understands, but when you got to go at that level up, sometimes it's a little painful, and you can see it in some of these hearings, some of the testimony.
Yeah.
It's tough, and they need to understand the problem set.
Yes. Yes.
I did a podcast yesterday with someone on ransomware, but it was more about the technical side of it, some of the evolution, some of the tactics, and he pointed out there's some scary stuff coming. Hardware level ransomware that's like eternally persistent.
Yep.
This is a fluid thing. Like we say ransomware, like it's this umbrella term, but it's not just this one thing.
Yep.
And how does that fit into what you guys are doing too, like in terms of developing?
Yes, it's like instead of software as a service, it's like fraud as a service now.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at extending the lessons learned from the task force to try and address some of these the unfinished work of the task force.
Right.
So how do we begin to drive down the fraud as a service business model? But yes, the evolution from double and triple extortion to physical threats is really scary.
Yeah.
And my view is the information is out there that we can defeat this. We have to have the political will that we're still struggling to really capitalize on.
It always feels like there has to be some giant incident to really get people to move in the right direction, and that's unfortunate still.
Yeah. I mean, I think had Colonial not happened, we all sort of somebody joked like, "Did you guys do that just to get your report read?" No. But it really
would have been just another report.
Would have been just another report. But it's continues. Ransomware is continuing to really paralyze not just people in the United States, but around the world. I mean, the impact of ransomware globally is difficult to assess, but we have been doing a kind of an assessment last year and the year before. We used leak site data to see where else ransomware is impacting governments, and it continues to grow.
Some of the successful disruptions of some of these groups, pretty prominent groups, have been kind of at least temporarily interrupted. They always pop up again, but regardless, you see the press release from DOJ, and it's always DOJ, FBI, and 9 other agencies that are involved. What's your experience in terms of like the coordination of this stuff and the actual execution of any attempt to disrupt these gangs?
I want to give tip my hat, if I may, to our friends in law enforcement. They have a tough job. They are under resourced, as I was saying a couple minutes ago. It is. I think it frustrates, particularly when you think about the security research community that is also seeing so much of this happen and are really, like all of us, troubled by it. But when you're following, building a case and following the rule of law, we have, policy and protections that we have to follow, and actually they benefit us in the long run too. But to build this kind of the holistic picture does require international collaboration and capacity. We are fortunate that in our country and many of the counter-ransomware initiative countries, that their law enforcement their maturity level is high.
Yeah.
But in some cases, you have threat actors operating from safe havens, and their neighbors are less capable of being helpful in an investigation. And so we really need to think about, in addition to better leveraging and collecting information, better building capacity globally across the law enforcement landscape. So it doesn't move as quickly as everyone would hope, but
Sure.
I think the pace of them has significantly increased, and that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
unfortunate, but it's a good thing.
Yeah. And it has to be done legally. I
Yes.
mean, there are legal barriers. Everybody just hack them back, do the same thing, and
No.
it's not that cut and dried ever.
No, hackback is not a
That's a bad
sound
thing.
policy solution. It is
Right.
really dangerous. Someone was saying, what are we going to do, hack back? I mean, some of these, they're leveraging cloud services and other capacity of
Right.
U.S. companies. So are we going to hack back in Redmond, Washington?
Right.
Or, no.
Attribution's hard enough without
Right.
taking down legitimate infrastructure.
Yeah. No, there are we made many recommendations about other ways that we can drive down ransomware without
Sure.
going on the offense in that way. We do think, though, that there is a need to leverage all of the tools in the U.S. government toolbox to defeat these actors, but it comes back to political will.
What about private industry? What's their role in this beyond information sharing, or is that kind of the extent of it?
I think industry has an opportunity to call upon our leadership, executive branch leadership, and the leadership of countries where they're selling services and operating businesses to say, we need your help in defeating this. I mean, it's costing them money as well. It's
Sure.
not just costing governments money, it's costing industry money. So it certainly, I would like to see what's their role in part. I'd like, please bring more secure products to the market so that we can not have ransomware leveraging the vulnerabilities that we are finding. So I think that's a piece of it too. But yes, information sharing, building more secure products, and calling for there to continue to be action from the top levels of government.
Yeah.
I think are three key things they could do.
That's why I hope some of these secure by initiatives really keep going. I mean, I know there's a lot of turbulence in the government right now, but secure by design to secure by default, it's really kind of like essential hygiene practices that would eliminate a lot of this stuff. And it doesn't help stuff that's out the door already a lot, but it's a huge effort.
Yes, we hope to play a key role in continuing that work. We're actively talking with stakeholders about the ongoing need to sustain the secure by design progress that's been made. And it's not just a U.S. government or U.S. Priority, right? The work that CISA did, the team there in developing the pledge and getting so many companies to sign on they were not just U.S. companies, and it wasn't just U.S. government agencies that were supportive. I think there were 14 governments that signed on to the white paper that CISA published. So it shows us that there is momentum growing internationally. And I think, at the end of the day, it's a way for U.S. companies to compete and continue to innovate in a way that we can continue to outperform peers.
Do you have a sense of whether it's working? I mean, you can sign a pledge, but to actually kind of do it.
One of the things we would like to do is to do kind of a light touch assessment of how the companies that signed on are fulfilling their commitments.
Sure.
I think it's also important to recognize that we don't expect there to be change immediate. It is a market shift. It's going to take time, but we hope that there are ways that we can see indicators of progress along the way. It's always hard to say build security in from the beginning. Like, well, how do we show that it's actually a cost savings? But it is, and so digging into some of the data behind that, the economics of it, is something that we hope as the initiative evolves and steps out of government. Hopefully, stay tuned for more on that. But that's something that we can demonstrate.
Yeah, I mean, if you can eliminate classes of vulnerabilities from the start, that's massive, because there are more vulnerabilities that are more tempting than others to these guys and easier to exploit.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like they're burning 0 days on everything.
Right, and that was one of the things that we mentioned in our progress report last year, is the number of end days that were used in some of these ransomware attacks. And so, eliminate a class of vulnerabilities, eliminate a huge part of the ransomware problem.
Yeah. So if you had a wish list in terms of like resources you need, is it money? Is it tech? Is it expertise? Probably all of the above, but is there a priority to that list? Or?
IST, we're a nonprofit. We could always use some support. We're very grateful to, like I said, Craig Newmark is one of our big funders, and Craig is the lifeline of the civil society movement around the Cyber Civil Defense Initiative. So his work is great, but it's the ongoing commitment by all of the stakeholders around the table, the 60-plus organizations and individuals, and to keep at this and not give up. Is it tech? Sure, but if you take a look at the report, you'll see that there isn't a single we should use MFA or we should. What we said was on the tech side, because this is it impacts entities and organizations across the economic landscape from the smallest to the biggest, unfortunately, that there should be. We need rather than there being 50 pieces of we have a blueprint, somebody else has a profile, someone else has a this. Let's have one resource to rule them all, if we can. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be doing this year is really working with the Center for Internet Security and the National Institute for Security and National Institute for Standards and Technology, not my organization, NIST, not it, IST, to update the ransomware profile that they have and merge it with our blueprint, so that we can make it, again, keeping it simple for the most vulnerable of us.
Yeah. I mean, they're just relentless, these actors. I mean, the stuff they're doing to hospitals, or seems to be less public now, but I'm sure it's still going on. Not reporting, and it's really terrifying.
It is. Yeah. And it's not just U.S. hospitals, and I'm trying to remember now. One of the countries that I saw their government had just been targeted by ransomware, particularly in some of the countries of the world, there is less of the private sector-led infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so you're putting not just hospitals, but government services at risk. People, pensioners can't get their pennies out of the government. They can't buy food. So the knock-on effects are really horrific.
Right. So just before we wrap up, I want to talk about payments. I mean, these victims are in real trouble sometimes, and it's law enforcement says don't pay, researchers say don't pay, and understandable why they would provide that kind of advice, but I don't know how realistic that is all the time. And I'm just, what's your experience? What are these discussions like internally for a victim?
I was talking with a friend who was the CISO at a company, I won't name it, but they were hit by ransomware, and they were working through their incident response plan, and I think at some point they all decided to get a couple minutes of sleep.
Yeah.
And they had not decided before they went to bed whether they were going to pay. And the next morning, the guy went to work, and the CEO said, "We're paying."
Oof.
If I can pay, at that point in time, it was like a $200,000 ransom, not some of these crazy demands of, and payments reaching over $1 billion last year is just nuts.
Right.
But it is really a heart-wrenching conversation to decide, are you going to continue to fuel the fire by paying, or do you risk your intellectual property being compromised, your employees being physically put at risk?
The data leaks.
At the same time, though, the simple solution is not let's just ban ransomware payments. Our view, and we published a roadmap last year to banning payments. We do think at the end of the day that will be effective, but we need to take some significant steps before we do that to have that be effective, that being a payment ban. And our assessment is that we're not far enough along those. I think there are 16 elements that we recommended ought to be accomplished before a payment ban goes into effect. We're not far enough along that pathway. The UK government just did a consultation around 3 ideas for one of which is a payment ban, but to think about move this direction. The members of the Counter Ransomware Initiative committed at the federal level that they should not pay ransoms, but there are alternatives to paying.
Yeah.
And those were some of the key recommendations that we made in the task force as well. Doing some due diligence, looking at we've moved back to the threat actors have shifted. Well, the landscape has also shifted because a lot of people do have backups now, where they didn't as much 4 years ago. So the threat actors are having to shift their TTPs to find the way that they can still bring the pain to the victim.
Right. They're always ahead, though, unfortunately.
Yes, it seems like one step ahead. Yes, it's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
And I don't think AI is going to. I used it. There's the bingo word. Hopefully AI can help us close some of those gaps.
Right. All right, Megan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Conversation.
Appreciate it.